Okay, it's official MIT time, 5 after the hour. Thank you for coming, everyone, and welcome to the 5th TLL Speaker Series event of the 2018-2019 series. Today, we're very excited to talk about the many flavors of Europe, which today it's Mini, Super, and good old Europe. And we have three amazing members of the MIT community and panelists. We've asked each of them to speak on a variety of things, and I suspect not all of them will talk about all of these, but the evolution or revolution of their programs, of their flavor of Europe, any external pressures they've noticed that's caused changes or to happen in their programs, and perhaps their vision for where their programs might go next in response to those pressures or constraints. As I mentioned, we have three panelists: Melissa Martin-Greene from the UROP office, Ted Equi from the SuperUROP office, or SuperUROP, and Fatima Hussain from the Mini-UROP office. I'd just like to say a few words about each of the panelists. So, Melissa Martin-Greene is the Senior Program Coordinator for UROP, and although Melissa has not been around for the 50 years of UROP, she has been around for, we counted 21 of them, which is pretty amazing. Anyone who's ever worked with Melissa, especially around UROP, knows she knows absolutely everything there is to know about UROP. I think she can channel a variety of undergraduate perspectives. She can channel a variety of graduate perspectives, and she can channel a variety of mentor or faculty perspectives about the program. So if there's anything you need to know about UROP, Melissa is definitely the woman, and I've had the pleasure of working with her on a variety of programs around UROP, so we're really glad she's here. Ted Equi is the EECS SuperUROP Industrial Liaison and the manager for research internships and career development for the LGO, Leaders in Global Operations Program in Sloan. Prior to coming, he's been here for 11 years, and prior to coming, he was the director of the microprocessor design at Intel, and I can imagine that many of the skills are completely relevant, and I'm not joking, actually. I think that's true. And he received his bachelor's and master's from MIT. And I was going to ask you beforehand if you had done a UROP. Did you do a UROP? Yes. All right. So we have, how many of you in the audience have done UROPs? All right. I'll take it. Great. And then the third panelist is Fatima Hussain. She's a doctoral candidate in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. She works with Martin Pulse. She founded the Mini-UROP program in 2014 to increase awareness and interest of undergraduates in sustainability research, which is related to our field. And she's going to talk more about the program. Something I find very, very interesting, a few things, is she's a graduate residence tutor for the 4th floor residents at Massey Hall. And she's the head of outreach and education for the Herman Project, which is a citizen science project investigating sourdough evolution, which I actually wish the session were longer because I'd love to hear about that as well. We're really looking forward to hearing everyone's perspectives. A note about the format: we've asked each of the participants to speak for 5 to 10 minutes, and then they'll all sit here together and we can ask them engaging questions. So thank you very much.
Hi. All right, so I'd like to start presentations about Europe with this great quote from Urop's founder, Margaret McVicker, because I think it illustrates the spirit through which Europe was created, and that's that MIT is deeply committed to the premise that undergraduates should inhabit a very special world, that of a moral and intellectual universe with certain fixed stars, but also with wide spaces in between where students can find room to wander and make their own paths. And UROP began in the fall of 1969. We were one of the first undergraduate research programs of our kind. And in that first year, we started with a mere 25 or so students working on a 4-credit program. And today, UROP has grown and evolved greatly, both here at MIT and internationally. There are UROP-branded programs and undergraduate research programs in most undergraduate institutions worldwide. And in founding UROP, UROP's central tenets were very, very simple. One, that students be engaged with faculty on academic research projects, that those projects be worthy of academic credit, and pretty much that was it. It was putting students in the lab with faculty, engaging in real substantive research. And the beauty is that UROP is something that students decide when they engage in it. Students can start anytime from first term, first year, all the way through their final semester, and we do see students engaging in that way. And we afford the opportunity for students to engage in their UROPs for pay, for credit, or as volunteers. I don't think it will surprise you, most of our students want to be paid. Very few students want to volunteer, but it is a good option that's available to students who are especially beginners or trying to test the waters of a particular field, maybe a student who wants to engage in a more substantive project, but then also sort of moonlight on the side with a volunteer UROP. That is an option available to them. I said we started with 25 students. Really, part of the largest evolution of UROP has been its growth throughout the Institute. Projects exist in every single academic department, in almost all of our interdisciplinary labs and centers. We have 91% of the past 2 graduating classes who have participated in UROP at least once in their time here. 61% of last year's first-year students engaged. And we have already seen, since to the greater focus on exploration in the current class, we have seen first-year students really jump on board and engaging in UROP. So it will be interesting to see if we still hit the 61% next year, or if we have an increase in first-year participation. Over half of the undergrad population is engaged in UROP at any time in any given academic year, with over half of our faculty. So UROP happens everywhere. And this past UROP cycle, over $9.5 million was allocated to support UROP research. And that is a combination of UROP office funds and faculty DLC funding. And it's roughly a 50-50 split. I think some of the key benefits for students, these have been benefits since the beginning of the program, but I think as research has evolved, as the concept of having undergrads engaged in the research environment, which was new when UROP was founded, but is pretty commonplace now, we see that students receiving mentorship from faculty and researchers early in their careers is key. It helps them explore their majors. It helps them make or change major choices. It helps them really develop those real-world research, communications, analytic, communication, collaborative skills, leadership skills. It's a great means for preparing for graduate school, for careers, for pre-health. And every single year we see students presenting their research, publishing their research, patenting, and we occasionally see spin-offs that are created as a result of UROP collaborations. Similar benefits exist for faculty and labs. We hear countless times from faculty that undergrads offer a fresh perspective. They come in eyes wide open, new to a particular field, and really enthusiastic and thinking outside of the box. And that contributes to the research in ways that in 1969 faculty hadn't quite seen. And it's proven that undergrads actually contribute in meaningful ways, and they help shape research teams. And graduate students and postdocs are learning to be effective mentors through their day-to-day supervision of UROP students. And these diverse research teams of PhDs, undergrads, faculty PIs, they contribute to advancing research and furthering innovation. One of the things that has evolved about UROP over the years is the level of programming and support that's offered centrally to students. Certainly, our funding resources have grown by leaps and bounds since 1969, and now we're seeing UROP Office Central Funds fund roughly half of the paid UROPs out there in a given year. And this is key for especially facilitating underclassmen and their engagement. First years, sophomores, more often than not, faculty members need those students to be supported by some central funding source because they're learning the skills and techniques to be effective in that research group and may or may not be ready to charge that student to a research grant. We offer outreach programming throughout the academic year with some targeted programming that has really ramped up in the past couple of years for first-year students, first-generation college students, and underrepresented populations. We also offer mentor training for graduate students and postdocs who are engaged in Europe, and we find that this dual programming does help enrich the undergraduate research experience for all involved. And we have new web content and materials coming online, as well as new workshops, particularly those focused on reflection and more transferable careers-related skills as it relates to finding a Europ. Many of the same strategies are used for finding internships and jobs later on. And looking ahead, I think one of the things about Urops is it's constantly evolving. As the research landscape evolves here at MIT, Urops evolves right along with it. We have seen, as MIT became more global, we have seen international Urops take root in some places. We have seen the faculty and the students really key to driving the evolution of Urops, and that happens at the department level. Things like Mini-UROP and SuperUROP are evolutions of this Urops model. It's highly customizable, and now departments are using this model of engaging undergrads with faculty on research to further departmental objectives and give students a deeper dive into a particular discipline. And we have service Urops that we are starting in collaboration with the Public Service Center. So the other thing that is interesting on Urops Horizon next year is our 50th anniversary year. So we will be holding a host of different events and celebrations. So look forward to that. Those will start happening in the fall and will be widely advertised. And we really look forward to seeing the ways in which our students and faculty help Urops evolve further. And we hope to help facilitate this further reach of Urops in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation to speak. We stand on shoulders of giants. So, here to talk about the SuperUROP program. I wear a couple of hats here as the introduction, working with EECS on SuperUROP, and you'll see over the years how it started in EECS, and that's where it's program managed out of, but it goes across all of MIT at this point. So the other hat I wear is in a graduate program, which is dual degree with Sloan and the School of Engineering, and that program's been around for 30 years. But it has that same research component. There we go. Okay, I can pick it up. So a little history. It started back in academic year 2012-13 by Anantha Chandrakasan when he was the department chair for EECS. And it was in response to student demand. There was a voltage subcommittee of students in terms of what was their experience, and also the visiting committee. And funds for SuperUROP, because the funding model is a little bit different than Europe, Anantha went out and raised funds from donors as well as industry sponsors to engage with the SuperUROP program. And the vision was really to build a community of researchers so that the students were sharing with each other as opposed to being in individual labs, so that they were coming together. The research, it's a research-based. Now, Urops is a research-based. It has to have academic content. But the nuance was that we were preparing them to do graduate-level research. So we wanted them to be integrated into lab groups, not just as somebody that's supporting a PhD student, but somebody that's doing some unique research on their own. And the it's really to motivate the supervisors to integrate the students into their lab. It's a year long versus, gee, I think I'll do this for a semester to try something out. My UROP experience, just reflecting back, was actually a discovery tour. When I came to MIT, I thought I was going to double major in nuclear engineering and chemical engineering. So I said, I don't really know what they mean. I did a UROP in nuclear engineering to see really what it was like. And I said, this is not for me. And then I used some UROPs to discover and then ended up in EECS and then in semiconductors eventually. But the UROP was this great exploration tool. And SuperUROP is when you've explored and done UROPs and now you've found a lab or you have a research area that you're really interested in exploring and potentially expanding to your master's, or you want to go in that area. So it's really an opportunity to take that to the next level and build on your UROP experience. UROP is a prerequisite for doing SuperUROP, so the students have to have demonstrated an ability to work in a lab and have a faculty member say, yes, this is somebody that's going to work well in your lab. It's also two components. It's the UROP component, which is the in-lab research, but it's also a course that is a sim requirement for course 6, and that is a 2-semester course that works on communication. And on the next slide, I'll talk about that. And we have 2 capstone events, large poster sessions where at the end of the first semester, the students are describing their project proposals, and then at the end of the second semester, they're sharing their results. In 2015 and 16, Dean Ian Weitz expanded the program to go across all of the School of Engineering, pulling in other departments. He provided some seed funds. Some of the departments have continued. Other departments haven't had raising money for SuperUROP as a priority. And then we had some individual donors who really wanted to bridge outside of the School of Engineering, so they have given some generous gifts. And one example is a donor who wanted to have students that bridged between CS and a HAS. So we've had SuperUROPs working with music, working with political science. So those are some examples. So at this point, we're kind of going across all of MIT. 100 out of the 130 students are still EECS students, with the balance being spread across the other departments. So this is the year-long experience. This is more the class construct. So the class that they have to take is 6 UAR, and it's a dual semester. They get credit. They'll get 12 units of credit, 6 units in the fall and 6 units in the spring, if they complete both semesters. If they drop after this first semester, essentially they don't receive any credit for the semester, because it's really about completing the research. And the final deliverable for the class is a journal-style paper, and I would say between 5 and 15% of those are actually submitted to journals and published. We have many students who say, I finished the paper early because we have to meet this deadline, and the faculty say, yeah, okay, that's, it's okay you don't have to hand in a separate paper. We have lectures each week where we invite faculty from across the departments, most of them, and this is the students get to do a survey of all the research that's happening within the departments, but also, we have Aeroastro faculty, Equi faculty. Sungbae Kim was just talking about Cheetah the other week. And we also have industry speakers. We've had Bob Metcalf come in, Dennis Buss, talk about their industry experience. And we do things like graduate panels. So some of the students are interested, or after they take SuperUROP, they say, hey, I really like research. I think I want to apply to a PhD program. And the project really gives them a nice talking document and something that they have some meat on that's part of their application. And other students have actually taken their idea from SuperUROP and done startups, or been motivated and engaged with individuals they've met and done things like Start 6, Start MIT. And so they decide on their journey based on that experience, industry, research, or startups. And this is just some of what the students have been and where they are in the labs. And this was a quote from one of the students. You know, they take it and they accelerate it. So they take a UROP and they create that as a SuperUROP proposal, and then they take that experience and they turn that into their MEng. And typically, they don't have to do that path, but that is a real accelerator, and we've seen students take a semester off their time here because of the structure that the program provides. That's all I have. Over to you.
So I'm Fatima Hussain. I'm a PhD candidate in civil and environmental engineering. And I'm here to tell you about Mini-UROP, which is a project we kind of just came up with. I'm actually honored that you've heard of it and invited us here. And before I begin, this is just a background is an electron micrograph of some non-tailed viruses that were recently discovered in our lab that my Mini-UROP took. So that's why that's on here. So I co-founded the Mini-UROP with my friend, Julia Hopkins. Both of us did our undergrads at MIT and then stayed on, took some time off and then came back to do PhDs in the same department. And our motivation was that we felt there was a disconnect between what people were thinking civil and environmental engineering was all about and the actual research going on in the department, because we're kind of at the front lines of discovery, but maybe the courses don't really align with the research so well. So to connect that gap, we wanted freshmen to be involved in the research that was going on. And as a graduate resident tutor, I actually see a lot of freshmen who are interested in sustainability. They come to MIT, they're really excited about it, but actually don't have an avenue to pursue that type of research because it's not super well advertised. And so that was kind of our dual aim and motivation here. And here's our first IAP poster that we used for advertisement. So it's been going on since actually January 2015. We have about 25 students per year. And this is kind of the rundown of how it works. It's specifically only for freshmen, and it's 4 weeks, basically full-time, 10 to 40 hours a week, depending on how much time is required in the lab. And it's a one-on-one research opportunity with either a PhD student or a postdoc. And what we do is we have the PhD students and postdocs come up with a project that they kind of work with me to develop that's specific for something a first-year student can handle. And then they come up with lightning lectures, like 2 or 3 slides describing it. The students come to that and then do a ranking of what projects they would want to be a part of. And then based on their interests and the interests of the mentors and the skill sets that they want, we kind of do a one-to-one matching. A lot of the projects that the civil side does or proposes have a lot of computational requirements such as MATLAB and R. So we have a crash course for 2 or 3 days in the very beginning of the program for the month of IAP to get the freshmen who have 0 programming experience up to par. And then how the program works for the month is that every week we all meet as a cohort and have lunch together on Fridays where we have different faculty from the department come and introduce their research. So it's kind of not just a one-on-one experience with the mentor, but also an introduction to the major itself and kind of more face time with different faculty that they probably haven't met yet because a lot of the core classes are not taught by Course 1 faculty. At the end, they either do a oral presentation. That's what we did for the first few years. This year was the first time we ended up doing a poster presentation, final exam type of thing where they did get graded. And one benefit I really see from this is that there's a short-term commitment. It's just a month. It's just your first IAP, but for potentially long-term opportunities. For example, my Mini-UROP, she worked with me for the entire month of January. I was able to train her in the wet lab, and then she stayed on with me for 3 years to work with me on a project and develop that further. So it's kind of a nice way for freshmen who might be interested in nuclear engineering to try it out first, for example, and then see if it works out or not, but in course one. We do have 6 units of pass-fail credit for the students, and this year, one way we decided to help motivate graduate students and postdocs, I guess mostly graduate students, to participate was also supply them with a 6-unit credit class that basically said that they, were mentors in this program. They went through this mentor training. They helped figure out exactly what a good project would be for freshmen. And so I think that's something that was really useful to help get more projects available for everyone. So I'm really excited about this. It has been developing, and I hope it grows. But I'd love to talk about how to make this possible for other departments if people are interested. Cool. All right. Thank you guys so much.
If you have any questions, we'll figure out how to get these on, and please come up and ask them, and hopefully we get a good discussion going.
I was wondering if you could each talk a little bit about sort of what mentor training happens for the folks who are mentoring the Urops.
Yeah, so mentor training was a big part of this to make sure we had appropriate Urops for bite-sized IAP projects. So before we do the lightning round in about December, so in November I actually meet with everyone individually to that's what we did in the first 2 years to come up with a project. But so that's part of it. And then just talking about what skills they should expect MIT freshmen to have and what types of interests. So it actually, I think there is a large disconnect between what postdocs and graduate students think an MIT freshman, who they are and what they actually are. So engaging in what they're doing in their background, what the GIRs are, what they've learned, what experiences they could have had in high school. It's more of just like to make sure they know what they're getting into. And then yeah, kind of also helping them be advisors for the freshmen in terms of introducing them to the major, introducing them to the members of the lab and stuff like this.
For Urops Central, we do training throughout the academic year. It is a modified program called Facilitating Effective Research. It's something that Janet actually developed when she was at Brown, and we've customized it specifically for Urop mentors. And we have done sessions focused for like a particular area, as well as sessions that are open to grad students and postdocs throughout the Institute. We offer about 4 or 5 offerings per year and see about 25 attendees for each of those. And we cover mentoring best practices, finding a good mentee match, talking about project sizing, and what's realistic to, expect for an undergrad, and giving them some sort of Urop 101 to give them a sense of, what our central expectations are for undergrads to gain from that experience, but also helping them contextualize, that students come at the research environment from a variety of different levels, and that they may have to scale their mentorship between various mentees based on where that student is coming into the pipeline.
We do nothing, but it's more out of they're juniors and seniors that are in SuperUROP, and they have to have done a Urops. And our message to the faculty member and the group is to really treat the SuperUROPs more as a graduate student, integrate them into the group as if they're part of the research group. So our expectation is that the mentors in there have received the Urop mentor training. There's no guarantee of that, but we don't do anything explicitly to train the mentors. They seem to be doing a good job.
So beyond Urops evolving just because research evolves, because obviously certain fields didn't exist 50 years ago, what are other ways you would like to see them evolve? Obviously there's the relationship with PKG. The new college has this emphasis on ethics, and so I'm wondering, outside of just sort of field changing and interdisciplinary studies, what other opportunities do you think Urops could sort of infuse beyond just sort of lab-based and hands-on learning?
I think that because so much of Europe is fueled by that undergrad faculty connection, and the day-to-day work that they do with their grad students and mentors, I would hope, and I think this has happened with Europe in the past 50 years, and I hope it will continue to happen, that Europe would continue to find its way into every area of the Institute, and that it may look a little different. It may take the form of like a Mini-UROP. It may be a year-long experience, as in SuperUROP. And it may be that new opportunities will be there in the College of Computing. I think because the model of Europe is so adaptable, it is easy to customize and fit a Europe model into another endeavor. And I do see it working, that faculty undergrad connection. It may be that in the next 50 years we see those happening outside of research experiences. Maybe it's other experiential collaborations between undergrads and faculty that become, the new Urops of tomorrow in addition to the traditional research ones. I don't see a future at MIT, in MIT's undergraduate education, that doesn't involve undergraduate research. It is really, an ingrained part of the MIT culture, and I think that's great, and I hope to see it continue.
I think one way that it could evolve is actually through the bridge or the collaboration. And also, we tried a few of them within SuperUROP. I'd like to see team-based Urops, where you have maybe 2 faculty members from different departments or different schools that are working on a program. Course 6 has Course 614, 6.7, and I think that may be an area that we might be able to explore, is really team-based Urops, because when the students leave these walls, they're going to be working in some form of team, and they can get some leadership there. I think GEL does it a little bit, but I think that's an opportunity that could be explored.
So this kind of already happens, but I think to advertise it more, so people don't necessarily need to do a Urop in the department that they're in. And so I think advertising this idea of Urops being a way to explore different concepts, using the skills you're gaining in one major and applying it to another, is something that does happen now, but it's not really emphasized as a way to use Urop. And I'm really excited about the PKG thing, because I did a PKG fellowship as an undergrad and a Urop separately, and it would have been awesome to combine those two.
Hi, I was really interested in the concept of awarding credit to graduate students who are mentors. I was just curious, how did that process come about, and is there, any sort of push to expand that to other programs besides Mini-UROP?
It came about because I think having an incentive, like on paper, to give credit to the grad students was really, really useful for them. In terms of, applying to faculty jobs and showing that they have experience not just teaching, but also mentoring undergrads, like on paper. I think that was really nice, not just in a letter of rec. So that came about because I saw all of these graduate students and postdocs going above and beyond and doing so much work for this one IAP term that I felt like they needed some formal accreditation there. I think that'd be great to do across the board. I know there is TA training, which we also were trying to learn some of those skills in this process, but I think that would be awesome, yeah.
So I've been excited today to hear about the SuperUROPs that are happening because it can be very helpful in the sciences to have continuity, to do multiple rounds of experimental design and see a project move forward. So I'm wondering what the plans are to expand that into the School of Science, and is there any reason that summer research couldn't also be incorporated, that it couldn't be even longer?
So the Dean of the School of Science, it really is something that it started in the School of, in Course 6, and then Dean Waits expanded its School of Engineering. It is really just an initiative that it needs fundraising if you're going to go beyond the Urops model. Some of the students just do standard Urops, and they take this class to give it that context and to be part of the community. The SuperUROPs, there's an additional funding to motivate both the faculty and the students to engage for that year. So it takes some work, and we have a staff of about 8 people running the program, the logistics, and so it's just a matter of priorities and investment. There's nothing stopping it.
I would also say that regular Urops often stay for many, many semesters. It's not like it's not just a semester often. Like the Urop office funded my student to stay for 2 years, so.
And I forgot to answer the question about the summer. Many of the SuperUROPs continue their summer and then into their MEng. And some students that don't have Urop before they apply do a Urop in the summer. So we essentially just say, do you have a commitment to do a Urop? And it's with the professor that they're going to be doing their SuperUROP with.
Hi, I had a question about the Mini-UROPs. I just think it's such a great idea. And it seems like a really good use of IAP, which could be kind of an underutilized time for students. And actually 2 questions. One was, do you see the Mini-UROP as kind of maybe a way of getting a student comfortable with doing this work and maybe going into a full-scale UROP and a SuperUROP? Is it sort of a way to get students comfortable with research? And then the other question I had was sort of riffing off of MiniEurope. Have you thought of having a micro Europe, like during spring vacation or something like that?
That's funny. Yeah, so that's kind of exactly the idea, to get students involved with research when they don't have classes. I think classes are kind of the biggest barrier. As a grad student mentor, it's my biggest barrier for my undergrad to work with me. And so having 4 weeks of solid time for training is exactly what I saw the Mini-UROP as. And then after that, in the semesters, I can kind of let them do their own thing, and they can be a real UROP by then. I feel like the month of January is already really short, so I don't know if a week would be worth it at all. Like the first week is already a lot, and it's complicated because we have like the boot camp and this and that and safety training and all these things. So I don't know if a week would be sufficient, but yeah, so that's what I was thinking.
Fatima, you have put a lot of and your colleague have put a ton of time and energy into MiniEurope, and I know the department is appreciative, but so what is the plan when you move on? What is the sustainability plan? Because I would hate to see it fall apart.
Same. So I have purposely not been involved in coordinating for the past 2 IAPs on purpose, and the idea, so the department admins have kind of taken on the organizing, but then there is, I guess in CE we have a graduate student board, like 6 or 7 graduate students who are willing to be more involved, and 2 of them often do it. We've been really lucky that we've had undergrads come grad students be in those departments, so like in that role, and those are the people who've been leading it this past 2 years. They're kind of the same trajectory. But I think it really does take someone who is a grad student to pull on like organizing the mentors and getting that rallied up. So I'm relying on that existing, but it's a really good question that keeps me up at night.
One follow-up question. So if you had to estimate the cost to the department, just so people in the room, if they're thinking about trying it in their own department, like it's lots of time and energy, but do you have a sense of what the department has budgeted?
Monetarily, it's really not that much because it's just like Friday lunch and buying, it's basically just food and that's it. I think it really comes down to a lot of time for the mentors and having that a possibility. And in course one, at least, we do a lot of field work, and IEP is the time a lot of people are away. So having people around during January is also a big issue sometimes. But yeah, funding-wise, it's not super much of an issue at all, but it's very much time.
Quick follow-up question on the funding question. Do the students get paid during this time? No, okay.
No, they get credit, though. They get a pass-fail
it's like
credit.
treated as a typical IAP.
Exactly, like 6 units, or whatever. Yeah.
Got it.
I'm going to ask a question. Oh, sorry. I just was wondering, Melissa, if you could explain the IROP, which is International Research Opportunities.
So IROP really is Europe. It's just Europe that's taking place in a global setting. And so it is generally a student doing field work with a faculty member. That's the most typical thing that we see. A number of our physics faculty members, this is a classic example, are CERN researchers, and over the summer the students go with the faculty and do research at CERN. We also see, faculty in various disciplines that are doing field work or leveraging collaborations that they have internationally. And the students will start by working on campus, say in a spring term or maybe a fall through a spring term on a particular project, and then over the summer, which is most typically the period of time that we see international research occur, then the student is going with a graduate student or the faculty member themselves to go and do field work or research with collaborators at a facility overseas. And so it's something that has existed in more or less formal terms since Urop's beginnings, but it's something as MIT looked to go more global and create more global experiences for students that we saw our faculty doing it with their Urops as well.
In the back, did you?
During the DFY class, we heard about this problem where EECS paid positions pay better than Urops, the summer research opportunities in other fields. And that can be a little bit stressful for low-income students, and I'm wondering what could be done about that, as well as the issue where paying students by the hour for life science research doesn't work super well in the real world because the hours that your experiments can take can be so unpredictable that you can be, how in undergrad would I have counted the hours where I was watching TV while analyzing data, or accounted for the weeks when suddenly things took 14 hours, anyway.
Yeah. We're mandated to pay undergraduates hourly, so that's why they're paid hourly, and it happens across the board. Our central Urop office funds are limited, so we set a minimum hourly rate, and that happens to be the flat hourly rate that we can fund at, because we're trying to stretch our limited funds as widely as possible across all the areas of the Institute. When faculty and DLCs are funding a Urop, they fund at whatever rate at the minimum or above the minimum their resources allow. And so areas that are very well funded may fund students at more premium wages than other areas. I do see that the average of faculty or DLC funded wages is always several dollars per hour more than the Urop minimum, and that's an average across the Institute. We do see areas where they strategically at the department level have payroll guidelines for paid undergrads within that department, that a first year with X, Y, or Z experience gets paid X, and it scales from there. And those areas, it tends to be the areas that are well funded. We do see lots of people pay at our, standard UROP rate as well. And again, I think it's a resource availability issue of, it would be lovely if we could pay people more. And we do look at the UROP wage regularly and increase it, as we can. And certainly whenever there's a legal mandate that, the state of Massachusetts or what have you is raising hourly rates, then UROP will scale with that as well. But it's definitely something we keep in mind too for undergrads. And summers tend to be the time when students are doing paid UROP most frequently because they can work 40 hours a week in the summer.
So my question is, UROP's such a great learning experience for students, but there's always sort of a little bit of headroom in terms of really optimizing the learning and taking it to the next level. So if each of you had a wish list or a magic wand that could sort of miraculously remove obstacles from your path, like what would you change, what would you add to kind of improve the UROP experience for students, improve their learning, make it easier for faculty to sponsor?
In my mind, I think we need to protect the students from themselves. I see the students overloading in terms of units, and then they don't, to do the lab work, to do the research, they need to just spend time resident, and part of the learning and collaboration that you learn is collegially and hanging out with your the PhDs, the postdocs, the master's students. That's part of the experience. And when you're trying to fit in P-sets and this and that, and even with SuperUROP, the students complain about the class, the communications part. Oh, it's taking away from my research, but they lump it all as one thing. So, in my mind, they would be better served taking less classes and treating UROP as a learning experience, as opposed to I'm doing this UROP instead of working in the dining hall. I worked at the Rob Deli. So.
I definitely think that we're headed in the right direction, where we're giving first-year students currently a little bit more room to explore. I think more opportunity, it's sort of echoing what Ted said, more opportunity for students to explore and engage in UROP as a meaningful co-curricular activity would be key. And I think some level of Research 101 sort of programming for students to help them understand better what they're getting into when they're entering the research environment, and maybe some skills development like they do with Mini-UROPs, where students could learn some basic skills, satisfy some safety training requirements and things like that, so that they could really hit the ground running when they start their UROPs. And of course, additional funding is always a great thing. I think we do a really good job at funding the majority of students that ask us for funds, but we are always turning students away. And I think that does sometimes limit opportunity for students. And it can deter faculty if they don't have their own research funding and they're not sure that they could get central funding for the number of students that they want to work with. I think that can be a limiting factor, and if we could, wave a magic wand and increase our funding, that would be brilliant. And then also the opportunities for graduate students to receive training in mentorship, in teaching and guidance. We do a level of it, TLL does it. It happens in these various pockets, but the more we could level the playing field and enable all of our graduate students to be better trained in mentoring undergrads, it just improves their skill set, but it also translates directly to benefit the undergrad researchers and give them a better experience overall as well.
And I think that's what Anantha saw when he did the fundraising. He didn't want to just say, okay, here's this new thing and let me glom it on top. He went outside and he said, I'm paying more to one, have a stickiness of the student and the faculty, and to motivate the faculty to put really meaty projects forward. And because there was that mutual benefit. So is the incentive alignment correct? Should you pay more? You know, but the donors want to motivate and align with who they're donating to. So the donors that are donating to chemical engineering want to support chemical engineering faculty and chemical engineering students. The civil and environmental, they have a small number of students, but they say, yes, here's our SuperUROP program. So it's really gives us stickiness. And yes, it is a differentiator, but I think that's more funding was needed to just, rather than just starting something, an unmandated funding.
I agree with all of that. I think if I had a magic wand, though, I'd make a pot of money that funded like the tuition for grad students for a semester to not, like they have that for TAing, they should have that for teaching in the lab. So I think that would incentivize both faculty to allow their graduate students to take UROPs and train them, which does take time and effort and does take away from their research. Like I do think that's true. But then if you had the tuition paid for that grad student for a semester to explore that fully, I think that would just increase the number of grad students who are mentors and good mentors, which is, for me, the limiting step in the Mini-UROP every year, for sure. It's getting enough mentors.
I'm from the Writing and Communications Center here at MIT, and we work with undergrads all the time on their resumes, and it's just amazing what a difference it makes to have that Europe experience. It's just a huge, huge gap between that and just having courses. This might be on. I don't know. So that's great. Thank you so much.
So are there any major activities planned for the 50th anniversary of Urops, like an institute-wide symposium?
So we are still in the planning stages. There will definitely be a series of events. We see it kicking off with programming in the fall that will continue throughout the year. So it will range from talks to some fun things to, you know, birthday party celebration. I mean, you name it. We're trying to do a lot of different things and not just have it be one day because that's hard for people to program, but really have it be a celebration that runs throughout the entire 50th year. So all of the details are not quite set yet, but will be set soon and will be widely advertised starting in the fall.
Quick question about Mini-UROP. I was wondering what the department sees as retention rates for students who participate in becoming majors or taking more civil classes.
Yeah, so I think that is somewhat of a motivation. For me, I don't really care what they major in, like as long as they do research in sustainability, like that was really the goal. I really think you can major in anything at MIT and do research in anything at MIT. So yeah, for me it was less about that. So I think it depends if they decide to take on the major or not. I think it has helped like people increase the number of people majoring in course one, but that wasn't really a measurable outcome I was looking at.
I think we're actually just at the hour, so unless somebody has just like a crazy burning question, which nobody shot their hand up, let's thank our panelists one more time, please.